I have worked the overnight shift in the VA Transitional Care Unit for 11 years, and in that time I have seen men refuse a lot of things. They refuse medication. They refuse meals. They refuse phone calls from people who love them. After enough years, you stop taking it personally and start reading it for what it is, not stubbornness. Exactly. More like a door that has been bolted from the inside by hands that know too well what can come through one. Staff Sergeant Darnell Whetstone, retired Army Special Forces, call sign Whetstone, which the men in his unit apparently shortened to just Stone, had been in room 14 for 7 days, and he had refused every nurse we sent him. Not loudly. That was the part nobody expected. He didn't shout or throw things. He simply looked at whoever came through the door and said, in a voice that left no room for negotiation, "Not you. Send somebody else." The first 2 nurses transferred out of their own accord by day 3. The third, a woman with 20 years of VA experience, lasted 4 days before she told the charge nurse she would not go back in. I didn't blame any of them. A man can say, "Not you," in a way that takes something out of you, even when the words themselves are ordinary. The charge nurse, Brenda Kowalczyk, sharp woman, ran the 3rd floor like a tight ship and rarely showed doubt, pulled me aside at the start of my Wednesday overnight, and told me she was bringing in someone new. A float nurse, first time on our floor. Young. Kowalczyk said it with a particular flatness that told me she wasn't expecting much. "Last option before we escalate to psych consultation," she said. "Try to keep him from running her off before midnight." I said I would do what I could. She came in at 2200 in teal scrubs, stethoscope looped around her neck, hospital badge clipped to her lanyard. Her name on the badge was Mara Voss, RN. She looked mid-30s, maybe younger in the corridor light, calm in the way that people who have learned to be calm on purpose are calm. Not the calm of someone who has never been rattled. I introduced myself. She shook my hand, and I noticed her grip was steady and her eyes were already moving, reading the hallway, the cart positions, the sight lines to room 14, the way the corridor bent at the nurse's station. Not anxious. Assessing. "He's been asking for the same thing every time a new nurse comes in," I told her. "He wants someone else." "Has he said why?" "Not to me." She nodded and didn't ask another question. Just picked up his chart, read it for 3 minutes without speaking, set it back down. Kowalczyk was watching from the station. I caught the look on her face, not hostile but waiting. She had seen 3 good nurses walk away from that door, and she was running out of runway. I think she expected this one to knock, "Here, not you," and come back down the hall before I finished my coffee. What I did not know then, what none of us knew, was that Mara Voss had been attached to a Special Forces operational detachment in Paktika province 6 years ago, a JSOC medical assignment so narrow that her name never appeared in any unit citation visible to anyone without a specific clearance level. She was not a Special Forces soldier. She was a combat medic, Army 68W, seconded to the ODA as a trauma specialist, because of something she had done in her first rotation that had reached the right ears. I would not learn the details of what she had done or who she was until close to 500 that morning, and I would learn it from Stone himself, which was its own kind of testament, because he had not spoken a full sentence to anyone in 7 days. She knocked on the door of room 14 at 2218. I was near enough to hear it. 2 short knocks, deliberate, not tentative. His voice came back the same as it always did. "Not you, send somebody else." She said, "I'm going to check your vitals and change the dressing on your left arm. I'll be in and out in 10 minutes. You don't have to talk to me." A long pause. I was watching the door. "You can leave the door open," she added. "Everett can stand in the hall." I did not know how she had learned my name in the 40 seconds since I told her. She had been reading the chart, but my name was not in it. She had simply listened when I introduced myself and filed it away. It was a small thing, and it told me something. Stone said nothing for a moment. Then, "Fine, leave it open." She went in. I stood in the doorway, far enough back to give the room its privacy, close enough to hear. She did not speak first. She set her kit on the bedside tray and worked without preamble, BP cuff, pulse ox, thermometer, the practiced economy of someone who has taken vitals in places where a wrong movement costs more than a reading. Stone watched her the way he watched everything, which was with the particular alertness of a man whose reflexes have never fully stood down. Not threatening, calibrated. She was leaning across to check the IV line when it happened. Her left sleeve rode up just past the wrist, not far, maybe 2 inches, and the light from the bedside lamp caught the back of her hand. A scar. Circular, maybe the size of a silver dollar, slightly raised, the kind of mark that shrapnel leaves when it burns its way through rather than cuts, old enough to have faded to a pale brownish white against her skin. Stone went absolutely still. I have worked 11 years in this ward, and I know what a man looks like when his body registers something before his mind has finished processing it. His hands, which had been loose on the blanket, tightened once and then released. His eyes moved to her face and stayed there. He said quietly, "Brakelin." She paused, just for a moment, a single breath's worth of pause. Then she continued checking the IV line and said without looking at him, "You're Stone." Neither of them said anything else for nearly a minute. She finished her work at the IV. She made a note in her tablet. She was about to reach for the dressing tray when he said, still quiet, "Pactica. The 19th of March. The 20th by the time it was over," she said. She pulled on a fresh glove and her voice did not change its register. "Hold your arm still for me." He held his arm still. I stood in the doorway and did not fully understand what I was hearing, but I understood that I was hearing something that mattered. The air in that room had shifted the way it shifts sometimes in a chapel, not silence exactly, but something intentional inside the silence. I did not move. She changed his dressing with the same efficiency she'd brought to everything else. He watched her hands the whole time. When she was done, she set the old dressing aside and pulled off her glove, and he said, "How many of you knew about the assignment?" 8 people with the clearance to see the full file, she said, and 12 men who were there. 11, he said. Kavar didn't make it. 3 years ago, his heart. Her hand stopped for a moment on the disposal kit. Just a moment. "I didn't know that," she said. "I'm sorry." "He used to talk about you," Stone said. "He didn't use your name. He used the call sign. He said when it got bad that night, when Rays went down in the first 2 minutes and we had nobody, he thought we were finished. Said there was this voice in the dark and it didn't stop working and it didn't panic and he couldn't understand how one person could do what you did for 19 hours. She tied off the disposal kit and set it on the tray. 19 hours and 40 minutes, she said, and there was no pride in it, just the precision of someone who logged the time the way you log everything that mattered, not for the record, but because the record is how you carry it. Stone lay back against the pillow. He looked like a man who had been carrying something at an angle for a long time and had just been allowed to set it down. "Is this why you're here?" he asked. "They put you on my floor." "I'm a float nurse," she said. "I go where they need me. I didn't know you were here until I read your chart." She capped her pen and met his eyes. "I'm going to let you sleep. I'll check in at 300. You don't have to talk then either." She came out of the room, pulled the door to half closed, and stood in the hallway making her chart notes. I watched her for a moment and then walked over. "What happened in Paktika province?" I asked. She looked up from the tablet. "That's between me and him," she said, not unkindly. Just a door bolted from the inside that she had chosen to keep. I respected that. But Stone told me himself at 3:50 when I went in to sit with him while she handled a call down the hall. He was awake. I don't think he slept much, and he told it the way soldiers tell things they have told before in their heads 1,000 times. His primary medic, Sergeant First Class Rays, had been killed in the opening minutes of the encirclement. Enemy contact on 3 sides, no air support available for 6 hours, no resupply. 12 men, 1 with a sucking chest wound, 2 with arterial bleeds, one unconscious. She had worked through the night alone with a field kit and her training, and whatever she could improvise, and she had kept every one of them alive until the helicopters came in the morning. The Distinguished Service Cross, Stone said. They gave it to her, classified ceremony. Most people in the Army don't know her name. She knows yours, I said. He was quiet, then, yeah, she does. At 4:30 I went back to the nurse's station to refill my coffee. Kowalczyk was still at the desk. She ran long nights when something was unsettled on the floor. She asked me how it was going in 14, and I told her it was going fine. She looked at me the way people look at you when they know you know more than you're saying, and I let her look. At 5:58, I was walking the corridor end when I heard the elevator. 3 men came off it. One walking on his own, maybe 40, short-cropped hair, army combat patch on a civilian jacket. One on a cane, moving carefully, a compression brace visible at his right knee. One in a power wheelchair, left arm resting on the armrest at an angle that told me it had been rebuilt by a surgeon. They came down the hall without rushing. They did not check in at the station. They knew the floor number. They had been given it, I found out later, by Stone. He had called them from his room phone at 3:40, about 10 minutes after I left his room, which meant he had called them while she was making her 300 rounds, and he was listening to her voice in the hallway. They stopped outside room 14. She was inside, making her end-of-shift notes. I don't think she knew they were there until the man with the combat patch knocked on the open door and said, simply, "Brakelin." She came to the door. For a moment she just stood there, looking at the 3 of them. The man with the cane said, "Ortega, we were there." She said, "I know who you are." Her voice was the same voice it had been all night, the voice that does not stop working and does not panic, but something in her face shifted, and it was not weakness. It was recognition of a debt that runs in both directions. They stood in the corridor outside room 14, the 3 men who had come, and the nurse who had kept 12 of them alive on one long night in a province most people couldn't find on a map, and I watched from the nurse's station and did not say a word. Kowalczyk was beside me. She had come out of the station when she heard the elevator, the way nurses do when something moves on the floor at an hour when nothing should be moving. She was watching the 4 of them, and after a moment she asked me quietly, "Who is she?" I thought about it. "She's his nurse," I said. "She's been his nurse all night." Kowalczyk didn't answer that. She just stood there with her hands on the station counter and watched Mara Voss shake hands with 3 men who had driven through the dark to be in that corridor by first light. And I believe the charge nurse who had sent her in as a last resort and expected her back down the hall within the hour was standing there rethinking every assumption she had walked into the shift with. That is what I carry from that night. Not the details of Paktika Province, though I have thought about them many times since. Not the Distinguished Service Cross or the classified ceremony or the 19 hours and 40 minutes in the dark. What I carry is the image of her standing in that doorway, same teal scrubs, stethoscope still around her neck, tablet under her arm, end of a 12-hour overnight shift, shaking hands with men who drove through the night because Stone called them. And Stone called them because after 7 days of sending everyone else away, he had finally let someone in. He had recognized her in the dark once before. Turned out he still could.